Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Jessica Rice here. Today, we're going to talk to you about how to secure your future and get in the driver's seat of your leadership. This is a really important topic, keeps coming up with different clients, and I felt like it was really important to share with everyone today. So I know we've all watched as the market has really shifted in industries that typically don't experience these types of shifts, and the fluctuations and shifts, they keep coming. So whether you've been directly impacted or know someone who has, then you know how scary it can feel. And I know leaders who have felt secure in their roles who later call me and tell me that they've been let go. And they're asking how they can bounce back and really find that right opportunity for them. And I can also say that in many cases they have. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Rice. I've worked with over 100 leaders to position their brands, secure opportunities, and really step into thought leadership. So as I started to really see what these shifts were that were taking place, and they were impacting, historically growth markets, I was starting to think about what brings greater security in our careers. And what I wanted to think about was, how do we flip the script? How do we help leaders become sought after in their industries versus waiting for the right opportunities to just come along and really put themselves in the driver's seat? So we often hear about certain leaders being asked to come over, head up a division, head up a company, lead a company. But what about those who aren't being targeted for the right opportunities? Not every opportunity that comes along is a right fit for us. And so not only getting into the driver's seat, but determining the direction that we want to go. What opportunity is aligned for us? And that's what we want, right? So what is it that makes some people marketable? And, I know that you probably know of some people who've been impacted by layoffs and maybe they were able to bounce back really quickly. So, what is it that they were able to do to help them along that path? Now, historically, we've really relied heavily, especially in corporate, on our resumes, right? How we fit all of ourselves into 2 pages of bullet points and explanations of what we've been able to accomplish. But that isn't enough anymore to explain who we are and what we stand for and really stand out amongst the crowd. So you cannot fit that onto 2 pages, who you are, the expertise, the experience, and all of the rest of the things that you bring to your leadership. And if we're really thinking about how do we put ourselves into the driver's seat of opportunities, then we cannot leave our value at the mercy of someone else's shortcomings. We can't leave ourselves only open to being judged by what we put onto our resume. And we can't always just put ourselves in a position where we're only allowing someone else to consider us for X position, and it doesn't really represent maybe what we even stand for. So I started to think about, what are things that other top leaders are doing? And I started looking at Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and Shelley Zallis and Mary Barra and Rosalind Brewer, Satya Nadella, Elon Musk even. And what is it that they do that's different from many of the ways that we approach our careers? And so before we dive in, I really want you to think about, what is one thing that you feel is holding you back from standing out as a leader or someone who's an industry leader in your market? See, not every leader has the same personality or communication style. And oftentimes, that's the first place that we go, right? We start thinking about what other people have that we don't. And we start to justify our position. Well, it's probably easier for them because they have XYZ. And whatever it is that we see as our deficit, our own shortcoming, we think that they must have. And the truth is that everyone has their own shortcomings. They've just learned how to define their perception about themselves, how they perceive themselves, and then position themselves for success. Their personal belief in themselves is what enables them to define their own narrative. So often, we are writing narratives about ourselves that are not even in alignment with the life that we want to live, or the career that we want to have, or the leadership style that we want to be. And what do I mean by all of that? If what you want in your career or in your life is in opposition to what it is that you tell yourself every single day, then you need to create a greater alignment with the words that you're speaking to yourself and the belief that you have in yourself with what it is that you want to be living and creating and doing in your life. Our mind will first believe what we tell it repeatedly before believing anything else. And yet, we look to others to validate our own belonging. Earl Nightingale said, and he's the author of The Strangest Secret, he wrote, "Men with goals succeed because they know where they're going." And we have to know where we're going in order to be successful. But in order to do that, we have to shift our thinking. We have to shift our narrative, our mindset, our story, and what it is that we tell ourselves every day in order to then shift the perceptions of others. It wasn't that Steve Jobs was an amazingly charismatic leader and everybody loved him and followed him. Even Harvard Business Review wrote that he was famously impatient, he was petulant and tough with the people around him. But he was also innovative, and he could get the best work out of you. And in short, Steve Jobs was a powerhouse. And as opposed to a rock star or a superstar, for many of us who kind of rose up in that era where those words were being tossed around a lot, I consider a powerhouse someone who can get things done and be immovable. They have a confidence and a greater knowing of who they are and what they bring to the table. And so there's really 3 moves that you can start doing now to become a sought after leader. And so the first move is the greatest move that you can make. And that is your personal brand. It's developing your personal brand, your leadership brand, your executive brand, whatever you want to call that. This is your insurance policy. And it's critical in today's economy. Our climate has proved that we can no longer leave our most precious asset, our livelihoods, to be managed and controlled by someone else. We have to take back our power, and we have to position ourselves both internally and externally in our industry. And so by developing our personal brand, we are, in a sense, defining what we stand for, what our purpose is, what our mission is. What do we align with? What are our core values? And really looking deeply into what it is that we want to be doing. What type of a leader am I? So that we can then find those right opportunities that then come along, and we can position ourselves to be that right fit. Because if we go into the wrong roles, we're going to find ourselves repeatedly in the same position that maybe historically we've already been. And if we're looking to rise up, what is it that we need to do to keep rising up, to keep positioning ourselves? And that is with your brand. Your resume may be a part of that, but it's not everything. It's only a small fraction. And so you really have to think about what it is that you stand for, so that then you can do step number 2, which is the visibility equation. This is where you couple your thought leadership with your influence. This is how you start putting yourself out there in a greater way, how you start sharing your knowledge, your know-how, your expertise, and you start creating what's known as that leadership presence or that executive presence, gravitas, whatever you would like to call that. It's your positioning, your authority. And when you think about this, I want you to remember that influence is not charisma. It's not getting people to do what you want them to do. It's about being in service to others and inspiring them to create change for themselves. And so when you can couple thought leadership with influence, then you can start to create momentum in your life. And so I want you to think about it in this way. Have you ever seen those contraptions where you have those spheres that dangle down and they're suspended maybe by 2 bars, right? And this is called Newton's cradle. And so you pull back one of those spheres and you pull it back and then you let it go and it hits all of the different spheres, and the shock waves that go between each sphere then shoots off the other sphere at the end. I'm sure many of you have seen this. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so it demonstrates for many, they call it the conservation of momentum. And in fact, there's actually still studies that are being done to further understand how this actually works. But if we think about what Nikola Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, then think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So if you are adding value to the world with thought leadership and influencing change through frequency, meaning consistently putting out your ideas, consistently showing up as that leader that you want to be, then your vibration is creating that movement change for you. And so consistency is oftentimes the most challenging piece in creating your brand, in creating your thought leadership, in creating how you want to show up. Because there's so many things that come into our lives. There's so many challenges and new deadlines and new projects and new stresses that impact our mindset. And sometimes we then start to justify our behaviors and our actions based upon the things that are happening externally around us. But when we create this paradigm shift of who I am and what it is that I want to stand for, then we start to think about how we show up no matter the circumstances that are happening, no matter the company that we work for, no matter the challenges that we're facing, because it's not, your value isn't based upon those circumstances. Your value is based upon what you bring each and every day, your wisdom, your expertise, your knowledge, your know-how. And so I really want you to think about how this sinks in for you, because oftentimes we align ourselves, our perceived value, our self-worth to the companies that we are associated with. And I see this all the time on LinkedIn, ex Amazon, ex Meta, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but that's not who you are. And so how do you start to shift who you are and coming out and being at the forefront of what it is that you stand for, so that other people, when they're thinking about you, they're thinking about you, not the company that you work for. Your network, this is number 3, your network determines your net worth. Who you surround yourself with matters. And so building your network, it needs to happen on a continuous basis. This needs to happen with people that you work alongside, as well as in your external field, looking beyond your present role. And you have to be continually looking about where you're headed, reaching out to those who have, that ability to make an impact in your life, as well as you in theirs. Now, the biggest lie that we oftentimes believe is that we have nothing to offer. And I want to tell you that you have everything to offer, starting with your connection, your friendship, and what you can bring in terms of trust, support, and integrity. Your circle of influence is the key to your success. And your purpose, why you're here, what you're driven to do, this is your master key. This is going to be the thing that unlocks every door for you, because it's the thing that you can continually come back to when everything else around you feels like chaos. You can come back to your purpose. You can come back to who you are. And that is your master key to unlocking every other piece. So if you've had that urge ever to either branch out, to rise up, to create something greater, have more of an impact, I want you to really consider, what has the cost of self-doubt been for you? What's the cost of self-doubt? If we've ever been called to do something greater in our careers, but we stopped short because either we felt tied to our present circumstances, those golden handcuffs were coming into play, maybe we had stocks invested, we had bonuses coming up, maybe out of fear of losing our present position or not being valued in the next role that we take on, or just not being able to carry it out. Maybe we're not able to do what we think or hope that we can do. And maybe we've attached ourselves so much to what others think about us that we start to doubt everything about ourselves, and all of the worry and all of the anxiety starts to come into play. And maybe then you even justify, well, I need to be able to provide for my family. I need to be able to provide for my lifestyle. And if I fail, then I can't do any of these things. All of this stems from our inner ego, which is really there to protect us, to keep us safe, to keep away threats. And as someone who studied neuroscience and applies this with my clients, which is really just a fancy way of saying that I study how people work and what motivates them, that most of us are governed by fear of failure that overshadows our desire to succeed. But we all want to succeed. So how do we move past this fear into a place where we are showing up every single day and owning what we bring, owning ourselves, our self-worth, our value in a way that differs from anything else that we've done previously? And in order to do that, we have to see ourselves differently. We have to understand that value. We can't only look to other people to validate our self-worth. And our lack of belief, it's what blocks us from stepping out of our comfort zone and into having greater control, into being in the driver's seat of our lives. And the way that we can do that is to create our own circle of influence, one that understands where we're headed, one that sees beyond the present. It's not limited by, say, our present circumstances. And in other words, they're not even in the same boat as you. You can think of them as in a different boat or a bigger boat, one that can see further, knows that there's an island up ahead. And so when you are actively cultivating and intentionally cultivating your circle of influence, now you're creating different connections, both mentally and physically, right? So not only within your mind, but you are physically creating your environment and the ways that you can have influence and show up and be seen and heard and valued. Most of us don't even realize that our circle of influence isn't cultivated. We are not intentionally creating it most times, because our circle of influence is our family, it's our friends, it's our coworkers, it's the people that we work with, and they have been circumstantially placed in our lives, which means that they don't always understand our dreams, our vision, where we're headed, what it is that we want to create, our value, because they're on a completely different trajectory, which is fine. But it's not our trajectory. And so if we're basing our self-worth and our value based on opinions of other people who can't even see what we're bringing and where we're wanting to go, we are holding ourselves back and we are blocking ourselves from seeing other opportunities that might even be right in front of us. But our lack of self-belief won't allow it. It's up to you to create this for yourself. And as you know, creating the right environment for our mindset isn't always easy. And putting ourselves out there and sharing our ideas can feel really scary. And I have many clients who, sometimes we have to walk it forward. How do we start putting ourselves out there in a way that feels natural and feels aligned, so that they're starting to share their thought leadership in a way that feels good for them. Because we are worried about what other people think and being perceived as successful. But when we have other people in our court, it emboldens us to be brave. It's not complicated. It's just being daring. So if you want to stop living in fear of the unknown and you want to be able to take charge, then you have to be in charge. You have to take charge. You have to take back your power and stop leaving it into the hands of someone else. Everyone has their own shortcomings. And we've seen this happening around us over and over again, where stock markets change and companies go from booming to broke. And we're wondering what's going to be next for us. And so I want you to consider for a moment what it might feel like to not be worried, to not be afraid, to not be fearful or have anxiety around what's around the corner. This is a paradigm shift in thinking. This is where you start taking back your power and owning what you bring and putting yourself into that driver's seat. We all face the fear of the unknown. But would we rather leave it to chance, or would we rather seize that moment and take the opportunity? Some of us would rather let our fears dictate and take the chance than put ourselves out there and risk falling flat on our face, or risk being seen as a failure or perceived in any other way. And we're so worried about controlling that image, and it's not quite the right image. Creating your brand is about putting yourself out there in service to others and how you share what it is that you bring, not your ego. To be known in your industry is not for the company that you work for. It's the work that you do in your industry. It's why you started in your field. It's what you wanted to accomplish when you started out in your industry, and all of the cool things that you wanted to create and to make a difference and to, lead change and be a part of innovation. All of those things, when you had bright eyes and big dreams and you started into your career, those are the things that you want to start stepping out and presenting again. It's not how productive you are and how well you manage your time and how efficient you are at some of your tasks. Those are all aspects of something, but it doesn't define who you are. What you bring to the table, your passions, your expertise, your natural strengths, your genuine leadership qualities, those are your brand. That is what you represent. That is what you start putting out there more. So if you're thinking about, okay, I want to create a brand, I want to get back into the driver's seat, it's not about how efficient you are at managing all of your hundreds of tasks. It's about what you represent and what you can bring to any company in the industry. I have a client he was recently let go. He was a top tier, he worked for a top tier tech company, top of his game, leading a large team. And they just went through a reorg. And unfortunately, it wasn't on his side. And so he called me up. He said that he was let go, but that he wanted to find the next role that was going to be right for him. And when he said it in this way, then I knew that A, he was ready, and B, really cool things were going to take place. Because we have to know and recognize that it's not any job. It's not any opportunity that we want. It's finding the one that's going to make a difference in our lives, where we can bring meaning back and deliver service in a way that is naturally who we are. And so when this started to take place, within 2 months' time, he started having multiple contenders that he was starting to consider for that next opportunity. 2 months is not a very long time in today's market. I've heard of people for over a year looking for opportunities. So 2 months for him finding, he had six companies lined up. But because of the work that we had been doing on refining what he brought to the table, what his leadership qualities were, what kind of a culture fit was he looking for, he was able to more easily, because it's hard sometimes to say no. How many of us struggle with just saying no in general? Hey, can you come do this for me? Can you take on this? And we struggle with saying no. Maybe we even delegate. And sometimes I know that's hard for leaders too. But he was able to more easily say no to the ones that weren't the right fit because he now knew what was a right fit. And so he found a right fit for him, and he's able to walk into that role with the right culture. And he chose culture first over opportunity, over having even the right team in certain settings. It was about culture. It was about how they were talking to him, how they were treating him, because he knew that he could create a greater impact if it was in alignment. And then the rest can always come. And it wasn't a step down, it was a step up. I want to make that clear. The biggest mistake that most leaders make is assuming that others see our value, and we don't do anything to nurture and cultivate our brand of leadership. My client, he wasn't loud. He's not very persuasive even. He just knew what he brought to the table. And it took some work. It did take a little bit of work to drill that down, because most of us struggle with really understanding what we bring. Most of us are out there trying to prove ourselves so much that we stopped looking at our value from an internal perspective. What's our intrinsic value? And so then we could position his messaging and how he showed up in his leadership, how he showed up in interviews, so that he was finding and delivering the right message for those opportunities. Sometimes it's not about being in the room as being in the right room. We don't want to be in any room. We want to be in the right room. And so if we start putting ourselves out there intentionally and building our executive brand and building our thought leadership presence and recognizing it's not about ego, it's about being humble and respecting ourselves enough and the work that we do and those that we're in partnership with, then we're able to create this paradigm shift in our thinking, and we can start to see how we can serve and how we add value to all the various rooms that we can go into. And it's no longer about having competition or compromising ourselves, because we are authentically aligning ourselves with our mission and our purpose. Now, I know that probably sounds easier said than done. It's probably easier maybe for certain people. And most often we don't think it's easy for us to create a personal brand. And we just, start to shut down. Maybe we're just like, no, I'll just go back to the resume route. I'll just go back to applying, or, hoping that I find the right leadership role, or that my company sees the value I bring. And eventually I'll get those right opportunities. But we know that in today's market, that's very risky. It's very risky to leave everything out there and not taking back some control, not putting yourself out there deliberately, and you determining the narrative about yourself. So I want you to challenge yourself to think differently, and also recognize this. If your job was easy, and if what you brought to the table was easy, then everyone would do it. Anyone could do your job. Everyone would bring what you bring. If your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, if it wasn't invaluable, then anyone can bring what it is that you bring. But I highly doubt that that is true. You have spent years acquiring your knowledge, your know-how, your expertise, your leadership style. You've been honing your craft and refining your skills. You don't want it to be easy such that anyone can do what you do. You want to know what the next steps are so that you can get to that next level in your journey, bringing with you all of the things that you have learned and gained throughout your career. And it probably does sound a bit daunting to do all of this. How do we start positioning ourselves online as an expert? The biggest question that most people come to me is, how do I start doing this without raising red flags within my company? I'm not wanting to leave my company. I just want to put myself back in the power seat. And there are strategies that we can employ to help you get there. Because sometimes strategically, it's not about leaving as much as it is refining, honing, building those internal connections while you're starting to create your brand. And you have an internal brand as well as an external brand. The goal is to start aligning them, start moving them together so you're not feeling like two separate people. You're starting to feel like one whole person. These are the strategies for being seen and respected and authentic in how you show up in your leadership, how you show up in your career and your role. And when you're starting to think about what's that next level for you, is it VP? Is it C-suite? Is it becoming a founder? Is it sitting on a board or being an executive board member? What is that? A lot of my clients are looking into what is that next thing that they can then deliver greater value within their careers. And, the other part that a lot of us think is really challenging, and it is time. Showing up, consistently online, putting together a brand, figuring out how you can do all of these things within your long meeting list, your load of, tasks and things you have to do and all the things that you have to remember. It is challenging, but there's techniques and there's ways that you can make it happen for yourself where it's not hard and arduous. If you can think about how you schedule your time, how you create consistency, how you spend time doing deep work, even, then you can start to think about what are those pockets, what are those moments that you can leverage to the maximum capacity. Because I know that most of my clients who have 14 plus meetings a day, oftentimes those meetings aren't the greatest use of their time. There's meetings that are, and then there's meetings that aren't. And so really becoming deliberate about how we spend our time is so important. In fact, there's a whole book about it, Essentialism, with Greg McKeown, about how we start really refining down our time, or Pareto's principle, the 80-20 rule. So there is some good news that I wanted to share with you, is that you don't really have to do it all alone. And so I did spend some time thinking about, how do I best serve other leaders who are wanting to get back into that driver's seat, create a brand for themselves, and really feel supported and not have to feel like they're doing it alone. So I want you to imagine if you were a part of a community that really accelerated all of this for you and surrounded you with other leaders who not only understood you and was motivating to you, but was a key connection, a key networking hub to start building your brand and creating that circle of influence for you even easier. And then also thinking about, you had the tools and the necessary resources to start knowing how to position yourself, knowing how to start putting yourself out there, gaining traction and visibility, along with support, coaching, training sessions, all of the resources and things that you could possibly think about needing or wanting as you're starting to put yourself out there, and where you even start or begin. And then that's what I created. I created a community called the Powerhouse Legacy Collective. And it's a place where ambitious leaders and visionaries can come in and start getting in touch with other people who are like them and cultivating that network of individuals that can lead to even greater opportunities, in addition to training and sessions and recordings, so that they never feel lost. They don't ever feel alone. And I don't want any leaders to feel alone when they're trying to do something big, like creating their executive brand. And so, in addition to that, when you come in, you also have access to Goalster, which I've partnered with. And this is, you can think of it as a mobile hub for developing your personal roadmap. You can create your own goals, you can track them, there's built-in accountability, and you get all of this as a part of as a member of the community. In addition to resources, tools, things that I have sent out to all of my hundreds of clients are now going to be available to you. And we also have a quarterly book club. We have a ton of books listed already in various categories that you could think about, and in your terms of rising up in your leadership: wealth and finance, neuroscience, mindset, thought leadership, building a brand, building a business. All of these books accumulated so that you don't even have to go out to anywhere else and try to figure out which book you're supposed to read. So I wanted to put all of this together for you. And if you come in now, because we just opened the doors, you can come in as a founding member. It's $67 a month. And as a founding member, you will have that $67 a month, less the cost of a lunch, really, a single lunch these days, for life. And that's what we're looking to bring to you. So there's weekly calls. There's actually 3 weekly calls. There's the momentum, there's training, and then we have coaching, group coaching, and Q&A. So anything that you could want, you can just ask. Plus, you can message me, and there's going to be options for you and opportunities for you to continue to grow as we continue to grow the community and add more to it. And so it's really also your opportunities for you to shape how you want to be supported, which is even probably the best part. And so I want you to think about, if you had all of these things in place for less than the cost of a single lunch that you could come to and use as your support system and be there for you each and every day, along with your own private mobile app that you can put your own custom goals into. And now you have a complete system that says, hey, let's make this road easier for you. Let's help put you back into the driver's seat of your life so that you have greater control. I want you to think about what that might feel like, because you don't have to feel lost. You don't have to wonder about what if. You don't have to think about, that sounds nice, but when I have time. It's all ready and baked for you. All you have to do is show up. All you have to do is go into the community and find resources and ask a question and make a connection. And it's there for you as a leader, because I know that the road on leadership is often lonely, but it doesn't have to be. And so the more that we're in connection, the more that we're in community, the more that we have a powerful network in place, the greater the right opportunities start to show up for us, the more that we can position ourselves in the driver's seat, and the greater ability to be that powerhouse in our lives so that we can start building on that legacy that we've already started. Think about the impact that you could make if you wanted to, if you just had the right resources. I'll go ahead and I'll put the link into the chat later. Go ahead. You can also scan this QR code if this is interesting to you, so that you can start thinking about what that would look like for you. What is it that you want to create with your life and your leadership, so that you're not at the mercy of your company, you're not at the mercy of anyone else, other than what you want to start defining your brand, what you stand for. These are your core values. And to be honest, I really do look at this as a paradigm shift for our entire industries. Because we're not just putting ourselves out on a resume hoping that people see us. We are putting ourselves out there, helping them to see what we bring. So the Powerhouse Legacy Collective is open. Our first meetings start next week. You can come in on the ground floor. You have lifetime membership access locked in for less than the cost of a lunch. And you have all the support, the tools, the resources, everything that you could possibly need to get going today. So I hope you can join me in there. I look forward to having you. Go ahead and DM me if this sounds interesting, or put Powerhouse into the comments. If you want to chat with me, learn more about it before signing up, that's fine. I'd love to sit down and talk with you about it because I can't possibly put it all into this webinar. However, there is so much more that's in store for you. So go ahead, check it out. I'd love for you to come be a part of this community. I really want high value, high creating leadership, executive brand presence, where we are a thought collective in it of itself. It sounds so cool because when I'm working with clients who are at that level, I mean, it sparks my brain and things start firing off and it's exciting. So when you're in a room full of people like that, or it's magic happens. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll go ahead and I'll put the link in there, or you can scan the QR code on your screen. I'd love to see you in there. All right. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.